Welcome to the first video in this burst education series on research methodology and statistics. We're going to start with literature searching, and in today's world of evidence-based medicine, this is a skill that every doctor should have, but I'd wager that not many of us are particularly good at. So let's get right in and set about changing that. So by the end of this short session, you should have an idea about the main medical databases, how to plan your search according to the question, a bit about mesh terms, some advanced search techniques, and finally to be able to conduct a thorough multi-level search in PubMed as an example. In days gone by, searching for literature meant going to a library, and in fact today that's no different, except that our libraries are online databases. Now, one very important thing to understand when searching is the difference between a database and a portal. We're all quite familiar with online portals such as PubMed, ScienceDirect, Ovid, EBSCO, etc. But these portals simply provide access to two main databases, and these are Medline and Embase. Medline is the bibliographic database provided by the US National Library of Medicine, which covers articles going back to 1966, but also provides selective access to articles going back all the way to 1809. There are over 23 million articles on Medline, and PubMed, which is one of the most common search engines that we use, provides free online access to the Medline database. One distinguishing feature of PubMed is that it uses mesh terms to index articles, and we'll talk about mesh terms in more detail a bit later on. Embase is Elsevier's database, which has particular strengths in pharmacology and toxicology and drug research. It includes articles going back to 1947 and selectively back to 1902. Currently it has over 32 million records, but whereas PubMed uses mesh terms, Embase uses Elsevier's life science thesaurus called Mtree to index articles. The Cochrane Library is a library of systematic reviews, and as a source of high quality evidence it's invaluable. But bear in mind, it only indexes systematic reviews and related articles. Synal is a nursing and allied health records database, and as we mentioned earlier, ScienceDirect, EBSCO, Ovid, Scopus and others are just portals which are used to access these databases. So if you are doing a literature search and want to be very thorough, at a minimum what we would recommend is that you should search Medline, Embase and the Cochrane Library through whichever portals you have at your disposal, and that would constitute a thorough search. Moving on to the actual process of performing a search. The main question is, what is the purpose of the search? Is it to find a specific paper? Is it a quick overview of a topic to guide evidence-based medicine? Or is it to find the highest quality evidence on a particular topic? Or perhaps even to conduct a full review of a topic? Depending on the answers to these questions, you will need to decide whether to search just one particular database or all of them. How wide do you want to cast your net? Do you want to find one or two specific articles, or do you want to capture every single relevant article ever written on a specific subject? Now, just to digress slightly for a moment, most of us are familiar with the concept of searching by keywords. The problem with keywords is that they can be very author dependent. If the authors of a particular paper don't use a word that you might expect to find in that paper, or, as is more common, they spell the word slightly differently, then there's a good chance you could miss the paper. MESH stands for medical subject headings, and unlike keywords, they are assigned by information scientists at the National Library of Medicine. There are standard terms for most medical conditions and procedures, and these scientists read through every new paper indexed on PubMed, applying the appropriate mesh terms irrespective of the keywords the author has chosen. It's not foolproof, as you'll see, but it's a lot less random than keywords. So now we get down to a bit of nitty-gritty. There are a few operators you can use during a search to increase your precision and efficiency. We'll go through these briefly and then use them in an example to make it clearer. The asterisk symbol is what is called truncation, and put simply it means that any alternate ending of the word beyond the symbol will be searched for. As in the example given here, searching for intubat asterisk will search for all variants including intubating, intubation, intubated, etc. Quotation marks are used to keep terms together. So if you want to search for a term with 2 or more words, then put them in quotations and your results will show specifically when these terms have occurred together. Boolean operators are useful ways of combining search terms. The AND operator narrows a search to only results which contain both terms, or broadens a search to results containing either term, and NOT again narrows results to exclude those containing the second term. If you're creating a long search, then parentheses can be used to define the order in which the terms are searched. So to quickly recap, you need to define the purpose of the search, your search question and terms, identify every possible synonym or truncation for your terms, and then construct your search in a logical manner using the advanced tools. Now I realize that was a very quick whistle-stop tour, so let's take an example to make things a bit clearer. Suppose you want to do a search for the treatment of post-radical prostatectomy incontinence. The phrases you'd be concentrating on would be treatment, post-radical prostatectomy, and incontinence, obviously. So your next step would be to find alternative phrases for each of those terms, and if possible identify any mesh terms that would be involved as well, and then perform an advanced search. So let's move over to PubMed and see how we'd go about doing that. So as we said, the first step in our literature search was to define our question, which in this case is the treatment of post-radical prostatectomy incontinence. Now you could be more specific and you could specify different types of treatments, but for purposes of an example, let's just take this for now. So we've identified our main terms, which are treatment, post-radical prostatectomy, and incontinence. And then we go about trying to establish all the synonyms for these terms. Now this is common sense in the first instance, but one way to find synonyms, of course, is just to go into Google and type synonyms for treatment or synonyms for incontinence. But for medical literature, another way to do it is, of course, to go across to PubMed and use mesh terms. Now, to find mesh terms on PubMed, what you need to do is go to the PubMed homepage, which you can see here, change the search criteria to, I've got it up here because I've used it recently, but it should normally be down here, mesh, and then search for your term. So in this case, let's search for treatment first. So here you can see that the main mesh term for treatment seems to be therapeutics. So you've got one synonym there already. And now if you click on that and you scroll down, you should see the tree for each term. So the therapeutics has a number of subcategories, obviously. But just above it here we have a list of entry terms which include therapeutic, therapy, therapies, treatment, and treatments. So that gives you an idea of the type of synonyms you can use, and similarly you could do the same for incontinence. And urinary incontinence here is a mesh term. Again, scroll down, you'll find the mesh tree. And urinary incontinence with subcategories including stress urinary incontinence and urge urinary incontinence. So in that way I've established some synonyms for each of our main terms. And so for post-radical prostatectomy, for example, we've got, it could be post-prostatectomy, it could be robotic prostatectomy, robotic-assisted prostatectomy, laparoscopic prostatectomy. But equally we want to exclude TURP and HOLEP, so we need to remember to factor that into our search as well. And similarly for incontinence, as we've seen, we've got some synonyms and we want to exclude fecal incontinence and just include urinary incontinence. So now let's go across to PubMed and see if we can start structuring our terms. So if we were just doing a standard search, we would search for treatment of post-radical prostatectomy incontinence. And that search would give us 80 results. And as you can see, physician role in physical activity for African American males undergoing radical prostatectomy, not particularly relevant, and none of the first few really are. You have to get to number 6 before you find something which is relevant to our search, so not brilliant in terms of the results. You could go on to the next few pages and you probably would find things, but let's see if we can get something slightly better. For that, we go over to Advanced Search. And this is our search builder, which allows us to use our Boolean operators and truncation. And the best way to use this is to divide your search into the sections that we've already divided over here. So we'll start with treatment, or, because we're using synonyms, so that will give us therapy, therapeutic, or any other extension of therapy, or therap. So let's use that. And the other term we've got is management. And we can also add surgical treatment, just to illustrate the use of the quotation marks here to keep a search term together. So if we search for that, that will give us millions of papers, which is what we would expect because it's a very non-specific search. But if we go back to Advanced Search now, what you'll see is that you have that search included in your search builder along with a number. And the use of that will be apparent later on. So let's go on to our next step, which is now to search for post-radical prostatectomy and synonyms. So again, let's use quotation marks, post-radical prostatectomy, in quotations. So we can use post-radical prostatectomy or post-prostatectomy or robotic prostatectomy or laparoscopic prostatectomy. So let's search for that. That gives us a few papers there. Go back to Advanced Search. And now it's in our search history again. So now we need to be careful here because we don't want TURP or HOLEP. So again, let's search for TURP or HOLEP or transurethral resection of prostate or transurethral prostatectomy. Now, undoubtedly there are other synonyms, and you could expand these terms indefinitely almost, but for sake of brevity and time, I'll just stick to these for the time being. Now I'd like to show you the utility of these numbers here. So we want to include only post-radical prostatectomy or these terms. We do not want these, and that's easily done by using the not operator. So we can get the 4,209 results from this search number 14 and cross-reference the results from search number 15, which is TURP HOLEP. And using the not operator, we can exclude any papers from here, from within here. So you'll see it wasn't many, but 4,209 came down to 4,030. So we excluded a few by doing that. Next is to search for incontinence. So rather than using separate fields, you can also just type it all in one field. So let's try that here. We'll use incontinence or urinary incontinence or stress incontinence, and then we can put that in parentheses, so that becomes one search, and then cross-reference that against fecal incontinence or fecal. Remember, there's different spellings can also make a difference, so fecal incontinence. Close that bracket, and that will give us that. So now we have our complex search here, which is split into different searches. Now all we need to do is cross-reference them appropriately. So now what we'd like to do is combine the search for the treatment section, combine the search for this section, which is post-radical but not TURP, and cross-reference that with the results of the incontinence search. So we'll do that by saying search number 13 and search number 16 and search number 17. So that will give us papers which are included in this search and this search and this search, which should be our most relevant papers. So let's see what we get. There we go. So we've got 711 papers, and number 1 is a surgical treatment for urinary incontinence after prostatectomy, a meta-analysis and systematic review. Much better. And as you can see, if you go down the list, we've got much more relevant papers than our first search, of which the results were both small and not very relevant. So I hope that's given you a bit of a flavour of how to do an advanced search in PubMed. At this point, I'd just like to make a little disclaimer by saying that if you are doing a full systematic review, there is no substitute for getting a proper literature search done by an information scientist. They're invariably good at what they do, and they will give you excellent results, albeit vast results. But that's what you want if you're doing a full review. On the other hand, for personal use and just to look up evidence on the fly, these are skills that are very useful, and I hope you've managed to pick up a few tips that you can use in your day-to-day practice. If you've got any comments or suggestions or queries, feel free to leave them in the comments and we'll try and get back to you as soon as we can.